Michael Malone, North Carolina's new coach, has his second ever transfer portal commit, and this dude is a bucket.
Hey, this is Jesse Holly, and you're listening to Locked On Tar Heels.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Happy Tuesday afternoon. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast. I'm your host, Isaac Shade. It's a breaking emergency edition of the podcast because finally we get the news that Utah transfer guard Terrence Brown has committed to the North Carolina Tar Heels. This is great news, so we're going to unpack it, who he is, what he brings, what it means for the roster, other transfer portal stuff, who might be next, all that and more. If you've got comments, if you've got questions, go over and drop them over there. We've already got a question from Baxter White, our guy Joe Alexander, and if you want to get in on that, do it as well. I know a lot of you, it's probably you're just getting back from lunch and trying to avoid working, so I'm glad to be that for you right now. I've still got my coffee because, I don't know, I go 2 cups a day, and that's where we're at. All right, you all, let's get into it. Terrence Brown to North Carolina. Also, of course, I've got my roster chart that we've got to pull up here that I forgot to actually bring into the studio. So let me get that pulled up while we are getting going. Yes, good. That's locked in. I'll say a few things and I'll pull that up in just a moment. All right, here we go. So Terrence Brown, there was this thought late last week that maybe he was actually going to commit to North Carolina on Friday. Multiple different sites and sources reported that, whether it was Inside Carolina or Tar Heel 247, even some of the national kind of more insiders. Travis Branham from 247 Sports had already crystal balled him to North Carolina, meaning basically like he was predicting that Terrence Brown would come to Carolina. But as you may or may not be aware, Terrence Brown unfortunately had a death in the family late last week, an aunt. And so everything went on hold. Understandably so, right? As well, it should have. And Travis Branham pulled down his, what's the word I'm looking for? Travis Branham pulled down his crystal ball. And so it was just like, all right, this is not going to happen. And the question then becomes, okay, so when then will Terrence Brown kind of be ready to come back again? Well, I didn't pull this in, but on his story yesterday, he posted on Instagram, I just want to thank everyone who has reached out to me and my family, showing love throughout the past couple days. I really appreciate all the love and support. Past couple days have been hard. Absolutely. And appreciate everyone giving me time and space to myself. Ready to get things back rolling. Love y'all, TB. And so basically saying it's been a hard couple days. Thank you to everyone who has given me space, which well done to not only the Carolina staff, but I'm assuming that means other staffs as well who were hoping for Terrence Brown's services, but also clearly that story, is like, okay, now it's time to go ahead and commit and get rolling. So when I saw that yesterday, it was kind of my assumption that we'd be sitting here doing today exactly what we're doing today. But you just never know until it's a reality, but now it is. As a reminder, this time last week, Terrence Brown was visiting Carolina. He then left without a verbal commitment. And I got to tell you, as always happens in the transfer portal, there was a crash out all over the place in Carolina land because everyone's like, he didn't commit. What are we going to do? Oh, no. Well, the good news is he also left Kansas without a verbal commit. And so I think that made everyone feel a little better. There was reporting, I think this was also from Travis Branham, that Terrence Brown was most likely then not going to take his scheduled Kentucky trip on Friday, which he didn't. And obviously because of the death, but still never did, which Kentucky, woof. Y'all are struggling out there in Lexington. If you think Tar Heel Nation is melting down sometimes or crashing out, I cannot fathom what Big Blue Nation is going through right now after they lost out on another commitment last night. Woof. So he never ends up going to Kentucky. And here's what's cool. Inside Carolina reports that basically Terrence Brown returned to his training in Las Vegas on Monday. And it was, quote, after a much needed break, Terrence Brown returned to his training gym in Las Vegas on Monday. And here it is. Y'all ready for this? This is incredible. There to greet the future Tar Heel, I like that they put it that way, was North Carolina's entire coaching staff. You can find a picture of that. It's out on social media. Obviously, this is minus Kim English, who has decided not to be a Carolina assistant coach this year. But in the picture, you can go see it. It's Terrence Brown, it's Coach Michael Malone, it's Chuck Martin, it's Pat Sullivan, and it's Sean May. And man, look, I know any coaching staff worth their salt is going to be smart enough to do that, but kudos to this brand new coach, because who knows if Michael Malone's state is. This is the first time we've seen something like this with Michael Malone in his tenure. And so I just love, because that is something that Dean Smith would do. That is something that Roy Williams would do. That's something that Hubert Davis would do. And I love that Michael Malone clearly and obviously gets the humanity in all of this. So my man, well done, Michael Malone and staff. I don't know whose idea or decision that was, but so good. And so the question becomes, all right, do the Tar Heels have their man at point guard? Because, and now let's go ahead and pull up the scholarship chart, or not the scholarship chart anymore. That's not what I call it anymore, because everybody gets a scholarship. You get a scholarship and you get a scholarship. I just call it the roster makeup chart now. So Terrence Brown becomes essentially the sixth player that we expect to be in the rotation on this roster. He joins Jaron Stevenson, Jaden Young, Neo Avdalis, Isaiah Dennis, and Maximo Adams. We'll talk about the shape of the roster and all that in a little bit. But none of those, I say all their names to say, none of those guys are your point guard. There's some, I think in the Locked on Tar Heels Discord this morning, somebody asked about Isaiah Dennis potentially running some point guard. I think he could be an emergency point guard, kind of in the way that Leaky Black was. I think he's a better probably point guard. But even coming into last season, a lot of the conversation was between, other than Caleb Wilson, the two incoming freshman guards, it was Derek Dixon that was more had more point guard skill sets than did Isaiah Dennis. So it's not him. It's not what Maximo Adams does. Obviously, Neo Avdalis has those capabilities and tendencies. And so I kind of like this thought of, yes, Carolina has just gone and landed their point guard with Terrence Brown, who's extremely athletic, is great with the ball in his hands, can do all that, is not a high-level assist man last year. And you can go look at his stats, but I'll tell you right now, averaged last year at Utah 3.8 assists a game to 2.4 turnovers. And that's the highest assist numbers he's ever had. In his 2 years at FDU, he had 3.2 assists a game and 2.2 assists per game. So that's never been his game. But even some of his conversation and some of the things he started to do down the stretch of this year seemed to indicate that he would start to do more with sharing the ball, and was reckoning with that. But also keep in mind that Neo Avdalis averaged 4.6 assists per game at Virginia Tech, where he didn't have much talent around him. And so I look at this and I say, yeah, I think that Terrence Brown is probably the guy that is more often than not bringing the ball up the court for North Carolina. He's 6'3", he's 175. But keep in mind, he doesn't have to be the only playmaker. You've got Avdalis. You've got other guys that can help. Henry Vasar, if he comes back, oh, please do, is a great big playmaker. And you know that Michael Malone knows how to have a big man who can be a great playmaker. And so that's what Henry can bring. So you look at that side of things and you ask, is this North Carolina's point guard? Again, my answer to that would be, I believe Terrence Brown will be the guy in the ball with his hands, bringing the ball up the court more often than not. But is he the guy that will be the consistent and always playmaker? I think that'll be shared duties. And I think that is a big win. But regardless of the answer to that, what I love perhaps most about this is one of the things I said repeatedly last year is that, unfortunately, the Kyan Evans thing, it just didn't work. He was not the guy. It didn't fit. Maybe the lights were too bright. I don't know. Whatever the reason, Carolina eventually had to pivot to Derek Dixon, and Derek filled in admirably. That's the word I'm looking for. Filled in admirably in a role that he shouldn't have been thrust into. And while he was steady, had some very big moments, the Duke pass, the Kentucky shot, the Kentucky drive, the three against Duke before the pass, a couple other things. He was not this always on dynamic playmaker who could get to the rim and do all that. And you look at Terrence Brown, and baby, that's what he brings to the table. Last year at Utah, Terrence Brown, 19.9 points a game. The year before that at FDU, 20.6 points per game to lead the NEC in scoring. And what's cool about that, if he was coming from FDU to Carolina, there might be some questions. And that would be fair, because how many times now have we seen guys up transfer in the portal and it does not hit or fit? So Utah has already been that intermediary between the mid-major level and Carolina. He scored 20 whatever it was at FDU, went to Utah to the Big 12 last year and dropped 19.9 a game. And so you already know it works at the high major level in what, in my opinion, is the best conference in basketball last year, the Big 12. So he is going to be a bucket coming to Carolina. And man, I think the inability to do that from the point guard position was a massive detriment to the Heels this year, because Carolina had to rely so heavily on Caleb Wilson and on Henry Vesar, but there was no critical guard that could take a ton of that gravity away from them. And now with Terrence Brown, with Neo Avdalas, you have that. You have that in spades. Now, obviously, you don't have Caleb Wilson, but you might still have Henry Vesar. We're going to talk about that more in just a second. But I just think it's so wise to now have a dude at guard who can go get you a bucket. So there's other stuff that Terrence Brown brings to the table. Of course, we would be short-sighted not to look at potential concerns with him and other things. Plus, I want to look at what else is going on with Carolina's roster, what we're waiting on, who's next, and all of that. So that's where we're going to head coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about Indeed, excuse me. No, that today's FanDuel. It's FanDuel. I'm pulling up the wrong read. It's a Tuesday afternoon. Forgive me. The NBA playoffs are here, where every possession matters, every matchup is magnified, and every game can swing a series. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers just like you a great way to get in on the action. Here's what I really like about it. You can bet just $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if that bet wins. That makes it easy to follow the action with player stats, trends, matchups, all in one place. And during the playoffs, they even actually give you extra insights that you can check out as well. But again, one-stop shopping. How great is that? It makes the entire playoff experience more engaging from start all the way to finish. Right now at FanDuel, Carolina is plus 3,000 to win the national championship next year. I think that might change with this update. And I don't even know if Carolina's done today, so we'll get there. But if you want to get in on that action, head to FanDuel.com right now to get started. Again, that's FanDuel. Play your game. Thanks for making Locked On Tar Heels your first listener watch. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you want to get in on our Everydayer Club, man, you absolutely need to go check out. That link is down in the show notes, but it's where you get ad-free versions of the show. You get one-on-one messaging with me, and when I get news, I drop it to you. I had great intel on the Seth Trimble stuff yesterday that I shared with our everydayers well in advance of when we actually talked about it on the show or it coming out publicly. So if you want to get in on that, go check it out. Again, that link's in the show notes. Okay. Some more on Terrence Brown. Again, 19.9 points a game last year. No worry about that translating. Another thing, maybe the second thing that I love the most is one of Carolina's biggest struggles last year was the free throw line. And with the guys that got there the most not being great free throw shooters, namely, of course, Caleb Wilson and Henry Vesar. That was, if there was any nitpick in Caleb's game, it was the free throw line. With Terrence Brown, he's this 6'3" guard who's 175. But last year, he got to the free throw line 6.4 times a game, and he hit 77.5% of them. So he's getting there a lot and he's knocking them down a lot. That is what Carolina needs to have happen from guys that are getting to the free throw line. What was Avdalis actually, as I speak of that? Did he go to the free throw line much? 3.3 attempts a game at 67.3%. So yeah, all the more reason you need Terrence Brown to balance that out, because unless Neo takes a leap this upcoming season, he wasn't doing it last year. So I really, really like the ability by Terrence Brown to get to the rim, to finish, and to do all of that. He can handle the ball. He can attack the rim. He's got elite athleticism, can finish with either hand really good. And there was a quote from his head coach last year, Alex Jensen at Utah, that really stuck out to me. He was talking about the growth that Terrence Brown had last year. And he says, quote, "From being a scorer in other stops," meaning FDU, "I think he's made big jumps in controlling the game." That's huge as you think about him being a point guard. Getting his other teammates involved, again, huge in being a point guard. Having more of a complete game. But here's the one that stands out to me. He says, "and also being the stopper." I don't want a dude to just come in and be a bucket, which Terrence Brown is. I want a guy who's going to come in and also be willing to buy in and do it on the defensive side of the floor. And that is a really encouraging thing to think about and hope about. Now, he's going to have to do it within team principles. He's going to have to do it with these other guys around him. You know that if we know Jaren's back and if Henry's back as well, you've got a front court that can be imposing, that can intimidate things. So your job, Terrence Brown, is to be a pest. Get up into a guy, because if he beats you, guess what? You got potentially Henry Vasar behind you, right? And so some of that is really encouraging. Now, a couple things to watch out for. I'm going to call them concerns, and we'll see what happens. In this day and age, you need guys who can knock down shots from outside. You need snipers. You'd think of Milan Momcilovic. You'd think of Paul McNeil at NC State, guys who hit over 100 threes, but made over 40% of them. That is not Terrence Brown's game. You guys, you're just going to have to be okay with that. For his career, he is, hear me say this, a sub 30% three-point shooter, 29.4 for his career. Now, encouragingly, he has gone up in his three-point percentage each year he's been in college, from 25% his freshman year to 29.6 his sophomore year to 32.7 last year. But at the same time, it's kind of concerning to say he's gone up each year and he's still only at 32.7. Let's say this, though. If he could just carry on that upward trajectory, maybe even just get can you get to 35% from beyond the arc? I think that would put you in a better place. It's not knocked down 40% shooter. But also consider this. He's going to have better talent around him than he ever had at Utah or FDU, where defenses are able to focus in on him. At Carolina, he's going to have an Avdalis. He's going to have a Stevenson, maybe a Vasar, somebody else we're waiting on, right? And so that to me is a very encouraging thing. Can you hit what might be some more open threes than you're used to seeing? We'll keep our eyes on that. So that is a bit of a concern. Another one is that he is, I fully expect him right now to be your starting point guard, your one. But he's not a traditional point guard in the sense of doling out assists. As we just talked about from his coach Jensen, he's made strides in that regard, but he clearly and obviously is more of a score first point guard. And so maybe, again, you just assume that Neo Avdalis is going to take care of a lot of that playmaking and let TB go be a bucket and score. But similar to his three-point shooting, he has grown in assists per game each year of college, from 2.2 to 3.2 to last year 3.8. So could he and Neo together average 9 or 10 assists per game? Feeding off each other, getting it to the bigs, getting it to whomever's going to play in the backcourt with them. There's some potential there. His turnovers per game went down last year, but his sophomore year averaged 3.3 turnovers a game. That's got to go down. What was his turnover percentage last year? Let me go find that. Turnover percentage. Oh, yeah, 11.7. That's so much better. Basically, for me, anything for a lead guard under 12 to 15 is pretty elite. Like Elliott and others were up closer to 20, right? And so I like that turnover percentage from Terrence Brown. And so there's all of that. And then the one other concern is the usage rate. Last year at Utah, his usage rate, I just lost it, was 33.8%. The year before it was 33.3%. He's going to be a guy that's been used to having the ball, using it, being the main guy a lot. How is he going to be able to transition? Not just mentally, like, are you good with it, but actually making that transition to, like, now you're on a team with a bunch of dudes and your usage rate is going to go down. Can he be efficient enough to get, even if it drops off to like 15 points a game? You know what I'm saying? So, but that is a concern to watch, is that usage rate. All right, next thing I want to get to is looking at what the addition means for the roster, what and who is going to be next for the Tar Heels. And so that's where we'll go, and we'll get to your comments all coming up here in just a second. Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, the guys, there are 6 guys right now confirmed that I expect to be rotation players. Terrence Brown and Neo Avdalis, the 2 transfer portal commits that have come in, both who will be, again, Neo is a 6'9" dude, but he's got point guard capabilities. So he's probably either your 1, 2, or 3. I think because of Terrence Brown, you call TB your 1, and then you call Neo your 2 or 3. Interchangeable. It doesn't matter in this day and age, right? You've also got Jaren Stevenson. My expectation right now is that Jaren is your starting 4. I think, yes, you go out and get some more guys that could be some depth behind him, but I don't know that Jaren commits to coming back unless it's pretty clear and obvious he's going to at least have a chance to be competitive for the starting 4. I don't see Carolina going out and recruiting over him, I guess is the way I would say it. You've got that. You've got Jaden Young coming back. I expect Jaden to be in a similar role to last year, where he's probably 7, 8, 9 on the depth chart and is providing some just tough grittiness off the bench, wants to fly around, wants to, he'll hit a 3 every now and again and do some things like that. You've got Isaiah Dennis, who has committed to coming back for Carolina. He's a guy that I think could take a big leap this year. Hopefully having a healthy offseason, able to come back and be ready to go. That could be huge for North Carolina. But I think there's a potential there for Dennis to have a big leap. I don't expect him to be a starter, but I would think he could be in that 6, 7, 8 range in terms of where he's at on the depth chart. And then you got Maximo Adams. Remember that Dylan Mingo is out. Carolina and Dylan and his people decided to part ways was the verbiage. But Maximo Adams is staying committed. And so he's kind of a 4-3, 3-4. He'll play one of those 2 roles. Probably with it, where this is trending, it feels like similar to last year, Carolina is going to have more personnel in the backcourt and the wings. So I would expect more that, like, maybe Maximo Adams is that backup to Jaren at the 4 is where he would most play. I think he's going to be a guy that contributes. So the question then is, all right, Isaac, those are the 6 guys right now. What else are we waiting on? Great question. So glad you asked. The biggest thing that we're all waiting on is Henry Vesar. Will Vesar come back to Carolina? Everything that I've seen and heard and read, rumors, intel, actual intel, all of that, is that, yes, Henry intends and plans to come back to North Carolina. It sounds like behind the scenes, they're just working on the numbers, right? I fully expect that's what's going to happen. So, yes, I think when the dust settles, whether that's today or next week or whatever, Henry will be a Tar Heel. Keep in mind a couple things, and I'm going to say we'll still go live tonight. Don't you worry. We're still going to have our Tuesday night live, but it'll be the Wednesday show. The transfer portal closes for everyone tonight, but for Carolina, because of the coaching change, it doesn't close till the 26th. I'll explain more about that tonight, like the ins and outs of why that is. But for now, just know that we don't have to just escape today and then, oh, good, Henry's not going anywhere in the portal, which, again, I don't expect him to. I fully expect it's Carolina or the draft. So the biggest thing we're looking at with Henry is, does he enter the NBA draft by the early entry deadline? We don't know, because that's still to come later on this week on Friday, if I'm remembering correctly. I'll talk about all those dates tonight, but that's what you're watching on with Henry. Again, I fully expect him to be back. Beyond Henry, the other piece of news that it sounds like could happen like at any point now is we've been talking about these two NC State guys, Paul McNeil, who's the sniper, and Matt Abel, who's a rising sophomore, showed a lot of flash, a lot of possibility last year. It sounds like with where things are trending now from all sorts of various sources and rumors and everything, is that Paul McNeil is leaning toward going back to NC State. But that it sounds like Matt Abel very well may be a Tar Heel. And yes, I think, hear me say, not definite, but I think that would mean Carolina is ultimately out on Juke Harris, because I know that's one of the other big questions. Now, I know that probably frustrates a lot of us. But the problem is similar to how about the coaching search, which Billy Donovan announces today he's stepping away from. Can you imagine if Carolina had waited on him and it was today, the day the portal closes, that Billy Donovan steps out? I mean, my goodness. But in a similar vein, you wonder, it just seems like Juke is going to play out for a long time and you'd have to wait. So the early entry withdrawal deadline is 10 days after the combine, which is still over a month away. If I remember, the combine ends on May 17th. So he would have, and all players have until May 27th to withdraw. You don't have a month and 6 days to wait on that. So why I like the Matt Abel pivot, and we can talk about this more in depth, probably on tonight's show, unless he commits today, but is instead of spending all the crazy money on Juke Harris, could you spend however much, a third less or whatever that is, to get next year's Juke Harris? Because go look at Juke Harris's freshman numbers. He took a crazy leap this year, his sophomore year. Is Matt Abel that next guy? Very well could be. So that's what you're trying to do. Coaches and GMs and staff have to have an eye for identifying talent and being efficient with their resources to spend less money to get the guy that's going to do that this year. Because then what does that allow you? If you spend the lesser money to get a Matt Abel and instead of Juke Harris, then that's money that you could spend on other positions. So could you go get a little bit of a higher level backup big than you were expecting, so that Henry, instead of having to play 35 minutes a game, could play 31 or 2, and then you've got a higher level big behind him or at the 4. What, you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? So I think that Henry and Matt Abel, those are the two things in my book to keep your eyes on movement next. In fact, I'm trying to keep tabs on things as we're talking, just to make sure there's no more news breaking, and it doesn't look like there is as we're talking. So again, the kind of where I'm at right now is it seems like Carolina will probably not get Paul McNeil. He's going to go back to NC State, and that Carolina might just pass on Juke ultimately, either because they don't want to wait or because they don't want to wait and not know if he's going to come to Carolina or Michigan or Tennessee or whatever, right? And then the next question this all begs, with Terrence Brown coming in, is what about the Seth Trimble of it all? Because literally yesterday, Seth Trimble entered the transfer portal with the potentiality that this 5-5 thing works and that he'd be grandfathered in and could come back. Well, it seems like right now it might make some sense that there would be some backcourt availability. But if you add Matt Abel and you have Terrence Brown and Matt Abel and Neo Avdalis and Isaiah Dennis and Jaden Young, that gets pretty crowded pretty quick. And so that's just something, the Seth of it all is something to keep your eyes on. So that's kind of the lay of the land with where things are at right now, where the roster's at, what I expect to be the next kind of movement to happen and all that. All right, what I want to do is go look and see if we've got some questions here in the chat. I mentioned it earlier. Baxter White had the first one. Baxter says, I love the signing. The big question is the fit. Can we make the rotation work without a true bona fide starting point guard? It's a great question from Baxter. And I'm assuming he means like without an Elliot Cadeau type point guard who is that past first guy. And so Baxter and others who might be asking that question, I think yes, but it's incumbent on Carolina to be wise about who is around him and who he plays with. And that's why, again, I think the Neo Avdalis of it all is really, really important. And so I think Carolina has already taken care of that with who they got even before Terrence Brown. So that's where I feel good about it. Our guy, Joe Alexander, who's often with us, says, I like the signing too, but I am curious if we're now in the overpaying for who is left stage. So basically, this is a supply and demand question from our guy Joe Alexander. Um, and so what's interesting is like I always think of, oh gosh, what was his name from Illinois that ended up going to K-State? Coleman Hawkins. That you remember that, and ended up getting like $2 million 2 off seasons ago, I think, or maybe 3, when $2 million was a lot. Like that was like one of the biggest numbers in the transfer portal in the supply and demand. And it was like, you ended up at K-State, or last year with PJ Haggerty leaving Memphis. And it's like, wow, where is PJ Haggerty going to go? He and his agents played their cards wrong, and he winds up, funny enough, also at K-State. Got a bag, but they sucked. And so as Carolina looks around the landscape, are they going to potentially have to overpay? Maybe. But Joe and others who might be wondering this, I think what you've got to do if you're Carolina is go find guys who, because I personally, for example, Terrence Brown, I think is probably undervalued. And obviously we don't know yet kind of the numbers and what he's going to get. But I would guess, I wouldn't be shocked if Carolina is going to be getting him for about what they paid for maybe Kyan Evans last year. And at that point, that means Terrence Brown's a steal, assuming he's able to do what we fully expect him to do, right? And so I don't think that Carolina has entered that stage yet. Plus, there will be potentially international guys and others. And so, man, it's a great question. I don't think so yet, but we'll watch for it. Let's find some other questions along the way here. James 117 says, any chance we could still get Juke? Yes, James, I would say there is a chance. As I just said a little bit ago, I don't think that is the likely scenario now, but it's not off the table. However, as Stay Vigilant has said just a couple things above you, Matt Abel, I forgot to say this in talking about Matt Abel, at On 3 right now, he does have a prediction for North Carolina. Not last I checked, he didn't have one on 247 Sports. Somebody could check in real time and let us know. But last time I checked Matt Abel, in fact, I still have his player page up. Let me refresh it. Nope, no crystal balls at this point on 247 for him. So just keep all of that in mind with that. So I would say, who was it that asked? James, there is still a chance Carolina could get Juke, but it seems like maybe the wisdom that they're going with is we would rather land 2 of these other guys plus save that money, because like if you were going to end up spending, let's just give a nice round $5 million on Juke, and you were only spending 2 each on, oh, isn't that weird to talk about only 2 million? Anyway, only 2 on a Terrence Brown and a Matt Abel. That's $4 million on those guys, and you've still got $1 million left over that you were going to commit to Juke Harris. And that's smart money, right? Like basically how do you moneyball this thing is what I'm trying to look at and think. So there's that. Let's see if we've got any other questions we want to hit as we go down through it. Our guy Joe Alexander says, if it is Isaac only Matt Abel or Paul McNeil, the 2 NC State guys, who would be best for us? This is a great question. One that I've honestly rolled around a lot and I've gone back and forth on a lot, interestingly enough. Carolina, in my mind, does need some sniper shooting. Paul McNeil, like, adds some other things, but really he's a 3D guy as you think about all that. But he does it really, really well. He's got good height at 6'5", hit over 100 threes last year, and again at over 40%. It was really, really good. In fact, I don't think I have his player stuff pulled up, but I can even tell you right here in real time what Paul's numbers were last year. It was last year, Paul McNeil, 105 made threes on a 42.7% clip, which, by the way, led the ACC in percentage. As a reminder, I've been saying only twice in the history of North Carolina basketball has a player made 100 or more threes in a season. It was 2 ACC Player of the Year seasons. It was Justin Jackson in 2016-17 and RJ Davis in 23-24. That's it. And so, yes, Paul McNeil would bring a huge capability in that regard that I think would really help Carolina with spacing and what they needed. But the all-around player that Matt Abel is, I think, is more enticing. And while Matt Abel is not the sniper that Paul McNeil is, last year, because Paul was doing that on 7.2 3-point attempts per game. Matt Abel, for example, is a fine 3-point shooter. He made 35.5% of his threes. It's not 42.7, but he did that shooting 7.5 attempts per game. But he added, I was looking at the wrong thing. Not 4.1 3-point attempts per game. I was looking at his per 40 minute numbers. And he had 8.8 points a game. But the trajectory of everything that Matt Abel's able to do on both sides of the ball, I think translates up. He shot just below 80% at the free throw line last year. You'd like to see him get there a little bit more. So I think in totality, the Matt Abel would probably be better. But from a roster construction, I think there is an argument, certainly for Paul McNeil. And so I think it's about the construction of it all, what you can get. So if Carolina gets Matt Abel, one thing I would love to see them do is still look at going and getting another shooter from somewhere. Maybe it's not quite Paul McNeil's caliber, but I think a Matt Abel and maybe that extra $1 million I talked about, there's somebody you could entice to come and be like a 3 or a 4 who could knock it down. And as B Row 8982 says here, Matt Abel's ceiling is super high. And I agreed with that. Like the ceiling for Matt Abel, in my opinion, is much higher than that of Paul McNeil. And so ultimately, yes, I think that McNeil is a great shooter and an elite shooter, quite frankly. But I think Matt Abel's projected jump this season would be more what we really need. James also asked the question, do you think Vaser will come back? As I said, yes, I do think it is. I think they're just haggling on numbers is what everything sounds like. But ultimately, all the scuttlebutt behind the scenes has been, yes, we fully expect Henry Vaser to come back. But here's the potential issue. If not, who are the bigs we have a chance on? I'll say it this way. There ain't nobody out there, at least in the domestic transfer portal, of Henry's caliber. There are guys in the international waters that could pop. That could be that. But right now, and that's the issue, James, is anybody behind Henry is not even sniffing a candle of his, like if Henry were to enter the transfer portal today, he's immediately a top 5 transfer portal guy. We'll put it that way. But the name I've been saying a lot is, for example, this time last year, none of us had even ever heard of Testa Ritter, who came to Virginia and was their starting 4 alongside Johan, or was he their 5? Anyway, he was one of their front court starters and became a first-team All-ACC player above Henry. And so there's no names that we would know right now, but as you think about who could be out there and who could come, man, there's a lot of potential. And so there's that. A couple funny things here I want to mention. Keen the Fiend, I don't even know what that means, says, is UNC still going after Mika Murinen? It sounds like no. There's been a lot of conversation about some concerns. Does he even want to come to college? All sorts of stuff with that. And it sounds like the connection that people were mentioning was a little bit overblown, like in how much Carolina had actually reached out and talked to him. So my full expectation is that no, Mika Murinen will not be a thing. Mark King asks, can we bring Cade Tyson back? I love this. So for those who hadn't seen it, Cade Tyson is leaving Minnesota. He's in the transfer portal right now. And that's hilarious. But no, here's the weird thing. I wonder, because, we talked about like with Kyan Evans, where the light's too bright. And Cade has said, I think it was a little bit too big for me in that moment, too bright. But now that he's gone and, because he was coming from Belmont, let's remember that he's gone and done it at the high major level at Minnesota. Maybe he's more prepared now to come back and handle things. Boy, he's got size. Boy, he's got shooting. But here's what you need to know. He's in that same boat as Seth Trimble, where Cade has just finished his last year, right? Because he came to Carolina as a junior, went to Minnesota, played that last year. So in order for him to be able to play another year, the 5-5 thing would have to happen, and he'd have to be grandfathered in. Yeah, 2 years at Belmont, Carolina, Minnesota. And so Yes, he's in the portal, but it's the same thing as Seth, and so I don't expect it. But that is a funny thing. I like to bring it that you bring up there. All right, let's see if there's any other. Melinda Dolphin, our friend, says, "Does Henry have a 7-foot brother or a friend?" Yeah, like is Henry like one of the Ivasic brothers, and we just didn't know about it? That's really funny. No, not that I know of. Maybe there's some other. I call Henry the Big Estonian. Maybe there's another Big Estonian out there that we just don't know about. Tar Heel Scott asks, do you see this year's team being more talented than last year's team if Henry returns and we get a sharpshooter signed? Boy, this is a really intriguing question to me that I've not thought about. Because there's a couple wrinkles to this, Scott. This is a great question. Because the first thing I think any of our brains should go to is there will be no singular player on this team that was as talented as Caleb Wilson. That's just the facts of the matter. Caleb Wilson was the most individually gifted player Carolina has had in a long time. And so, no, nobody on this roster is going to sniff that. But the question does become, and I think this is more what Scott's asking, is the sum of the parts of this year's team potentially better than the sum of the parts of last year's team? And that's an intriguing thing. I think it's dependent on a couple things, Scott. Number one, as you said, if Henry returns, that's critical here. That's key. The other thing then is if Henry comes back, I think you're 4 starters right now I've got kind of penciled in being Terrence Brown, being Neo Avdalis, Jaron Stevenson, and Henry Vasar. I think that the capability and the different ways those guys could mesh seems to project that it could be because you just never, again, had that point guard last year. You never had somebody with Avdalis's really tantalizing mix of talent. I mean, man, that's interesting. And then the question becomes, who is that 5th starter? Because, I mean, clearly, I don't think Carolina is planning on starting Jaden Young or Isaiah Dennis at the 2 or the 3. I think those guys are going to be great depth pieces. But again, I don't see them being one of the main 5 starters. And so let's say it is Matt Abel that comes in. Similar to Avdalis, there is a tantalizing ceiling with Matt Abel. I mean, where was Matt Abel ranked last year in coming in? Get out of here, ads. Yeah, he was number 28 at 247, the number 6 shooting guard in the country last year, coming out of Florida, out of Fort Lauderdale. And so was really highly regarded. Same with Avdalis. And so if you get that, you've got Maximo Adams coming off the bench. I know there's a question down here. Where is it? Prodluca. Prodluca? I don't know. Says, will Maximo Adams start? I don't expect it. No. But I think he's going to be a guy that Carolina is going to get some important minutes from. And that's what you need is teams that have veteran capability. Like, think about this. It projects right now that Carolina will not have a starting freshman. And that's what you need in this day and age. And when Henry comes back, you're going to have a bunch of dudes that have come back. That's another thing you need, because if it's Terrence Brown, that's a senior, a sophomore in Avdalis. If Matt Abel comes, a sophomore, a senior in Jaron Stevenson, and a senior in Henry Vasar. I mean, my goodness. And then Adams, as a really talented freshman, can come off the bench and contribute without having to have the weight on his shoulders. Isaiah Dennis can do this, right? And so I'm encouraged by a lot of that. So really, really good questions here. Really, really good comments. I'm so grateful for all of it that you guys have brought in. Now, we are still going to go live tonight, as we always do. And so be prepared for that. If there's more news, we will either go live later this afternoon if Matt Abel commits or Henry comes back or something else out of the blue. We're still looking at who are those other 2 assistant coaches going to be, because you already had one position to fill and now the one vacated by Kim English as well. So I want to thank you all for being here. We got a great crew in here around the lunch hour. I appreciate you all slacking on whatever work you're supposed to be doing right now as you come back from lunch. Maybe you took a late lunch and you're hanging out, and I appreciate that. If you've not subscribed to Locked On Tar Heels on YouTube, do it right now. If you haven't subscribed and downloaded on the audio versions of the show, I've been saying it a lot now. Would you please do me a favor and go to your favorite audio podcast platform and subscribe to the show and download every episode, because that's one of the things, like, audio downloads matter in a big way, and that would help so much. And it, like, truly, I would be honored if you would do that. Also, if you want to join our Locked On Tar Heels Discord, where we're having banter about this all the time, man, come on in. That link's down in the show notes, as is the link for the Everydayers Club, where you get one-on-one messaging with me and ad-free versions of the show. All right, I want you all to say it with me. You know the drill. It's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll talk again tonight. But until then, peace.